Hello, I'm Ralph Kiggell, and I'm just going to say a few words about the PechaKucha, and then before handing over to Mara in Turin. I'm usually in Thailand in the Asian time zone, but I happen to be in Helsinki on my way to England tomorrow, so that's very convenient for this time. This is the second time that the International Mokuhanga Association, which hosted usually hosts conferences every 3 years, but in the interim we're having these PechaKucha gatherings. So we're coming from the European time zone with Mara Cozzolino in Turin as moderator. The PechaKucha Zoom host is Kentler Drawing Space, New York, which Florence just introduced a while ago. And for today, we have 3 excellent speakers who will each talk for about 10 minutes, but not more than 12, which is loosely based on the PechaKucha format. The 3 speakers are from Britain, Poland, and Ireland, and they all use Mokuhanga in different ways in their work with different experiences, which no doubt they will all talk about. A further note, just in case you're stepping in into slightly unfamiliar territory, Mokuhanga is the general term that has come to be used for woodcut prints that use water-soluble pigments, which are printed by hand using mostly Japanese materials and tools. And it's usually based on the traditional Japanese method. Over to you, Mara.
Okay, thank you, Ralph, for the introduction. And I apologize to everybody. As you can clearly listen, I'm not a native English speaker. I'm from Italy, and I will try to do my best. So I think we need to start immediately with the presenter because there is some great stuff really to listen. And we'll begin with Laura Boswell from UK, and I'll read a very short bio. Laura Boswell works with lino and woodcut. She began printmaking in 2005 after a career in the photographic industry. She had attended 3 residencies in Japan to study Mokuhanga, and her book, Making Japanese Woodblock Prints, was published in 2019. Laura's Japanese studies have a profound effect on her linocut printmaking, and she works with many layers of transparent color. She often uses a brush or dip pen to draw on the wood or lino, cutting blocks to give the illusion to draw of painted line. Her works focus on a sense of space and scale and are an evocation of a place rather than specific geographic studies. Laura, if you can go on with the presentation, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's get started. There we go. So thank you, everybody. I am going to talk about two projects that I did very, very early on when I was learning about Japanese woodblock printing. So I attended what was the Nagasawa art program in 2009, and then I went back and studied with MI Lab in 2013. And in 2014, I took on 2 large-scale public art projects for our National Health Service. And this is the first slide is of the first project. And this project was called 14 Views of the Isle of Wight. And I'm just going to go on to the next slide so that you can get an idea of the scale of these. And the National Health Service had a budget for having some public art at a new build health centre. The Isle of Wight is a sort of resort. It's a little island just off the coast of the UK, and it's a sort of resort place, a holiday place. And I was commissioned to produce some large-scale prints for a health centre there. And here's one of the drawings for that. So these prints were about 1.20 meters across, and I had never done any large scale work, Mokuhanga work, and I undertook this, and because I didn't know very much about it, I didn't realize quite what I was taking on. And I had 4 months to produce 14 prints that were absolutely enormous. What an idiot. So what I did was to look at views of the island and also to try and twist them. If you, I mean, as I'm sure in your countries, you have tourist areas which are very famous, and all the views, the beautiful views get done to death. Everybody does many pictures of them. So I tried to take a slightly subversive and different view. This is Osborne House, which is where Queen Victoria used to come with her children and Albert to relax on the Isle of Wight. So rather than making that the feature of the print, here you can see I've made all the trees much more important than the house. So I was trying constantly to put a twist onto, I'm just going to go forward and then go back onto these prints. This is another famous view, and I spoke to the staff at the health centre where these prints were going to go and asked them to choose their favourite views of the island, because doing a public art project, and I've done a few, is very important to give the people a sense of ownership and feeling like they have a say rather than just having the art imposed on them. So I asked the nursing staff what views they would like me to use, and they came up with the absolute classic chocolate box views. So I tried to change them and make them very unlike anything that would have gone before. And to do that, I changed the style and the viewpoint, and I tried to make them look very different. A lot of that inspiration came from prints that I'd seen, Mokuhanga prints that I'd seen while I was doing my residencies in Japan. But there's also kind of a big nod to travel posters of the 40s and 50s as well. So you can see I was working here. This is birch that I was cutting. So because these were such big prints and there wasn't a huge budget, I was working with birch plywood from the timber merchant rather than Sheena ply or anything like that, which was really quite a physical feat. There's another one. Here you can see in this one, I've actually, the sky is very loosely printed, and I did a lot of very loose printing. Because I didn't have any time, I didn't proof any of these prints when I was creating them. I literally cut them and then I printed them, and those were the prints that went off to the health centre to be put up. So in the UK, we have a directive from the government that a certain percentage of any new build of a public building is given over to the art, and that's where the budget came from for this. And here you can see this new build, and here's the receptionist there with one of the prints, which gives you kind of an idea of the scale. So the other thing about creating Mokuhanga for a public art project is that you have to be very careful about the images, and I had to have several meetings beforehand to check that there wasn't anything controversial going into the images, which there were sort of really odd things, like you weren't allowed dogs or flocks of birds, or sort of bizarre, surreal things, because they could cause problems with people attending the health centre, and they had to be upbeat and cheerful. So there were all kinds of things that I would never normally think about in my everyday designing of prints to fit in. So that was a consideration. Yeah, here's another print. And they ranged in size as well. That's the smallest of all of them. And it was a very tight turnaround. And we go on to the other one. And it was a sharp learning curve. But at the end of it, I won another commission. And here is, I'm going to talk through 3 prints that I did for a hospice, so end of life care building down on the south coast in England. And having completed the 14 views of the Isle of Wight, I then took on these 3 prints. And the South Downs is a very famous place, again, for walking. And my brief here was to create the feel of the South Downs, but to not use any specific landmarks. So very different from the Isle of Wight, in that I had to create a very kind of ambiguous view, but was still recognizable. And here I can show you, there are 2 versions. They had no money, really. So in order to have 6 prints, what we did was to do a summer version and a winter version. And that just gives you an idea. Again, I was working on birch ply, so working very large. And here you can see the background is actually a great big plank of oak. And I've used that with the bark on it still to create this background, the landscape in the background. And there's my oak, which was weeping tannins quite a lot. And so I was lining it up using a sort of makeshift jig there. And here again is the next print. And I did different skies for this print. And the prints had to be color coded to different areas in the hospice. So this is the green wing, and then they had a sort of purple wing, and the prints fitted into those. And I'm just looking at my time. I think I'm about coming up to time. And I think this is the last print. Yeah, good. That is the last print. So these 2 projects, as I say, now I would have been a lot more wary, but back then I was terribly ignorant about the process. So I agreed to do it. And I'm glad that I achieved it, but it was really, really stressy creating those prints. So I thought I would share that with you as a kind of really naive foray into Mokuhanga when I really wasn't quite sure about the process and what I was doing with it. And I think that's me at time. Okay.
Thank you. That was like very, very well timed.
Well, I lost track of the time halfway through, so that was lucky.
It was lovely, Laura. Thank you so much. We'll now move to the second presenter, which is Tomasz Kawałczyk. And after him, there will be Kate McDonough. And after all presenter, we will start the Q&A session. So if you have some questions for Laura, keep them for later, and there will be hopefully a lot of time. So the next presenter is, as I say, Tomasz Kawałczyk from Poland. And Tomasz studied at the Faculty of Graphics and Painting at the Academy of Fine Arts in Łódź in Poland. And since 2009, he has been working as an assistant professor at his alma mater. In 2017, he defended his doctoral thesis. And since 2020, he is a vice dean at the Faculty of Fine Arts of the Academy of Fine Arts in Łódź. Tomasz's work is mainly associated with the woodcut technique and sculpture. In his work for 2019, he focused his research on combining original woodcuts and the system of Japanese folding screens, byobu, into spatial graphic object. And Tomasz, it's up to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I would like to thanks for the invitation. It's an honor for me, and I would like to thank you all members who will join this meeting. It's impressive. I'm very happy of that. Today I would like to tell you about my inspiration of Mokuhanga printmaking process. And during my studies, I went to the summer's work and travel holidays to Ireland, and I was picking apples and pumpkins in the field. And one day I straight had my back, look at the blue sky, and thought I would like to learn Japanese calligraphy. The thought was irrational, flesh, and I still cannot explain why I thought about it then. But after returning to Poland from my vacation, I joined Japanese language lessons where I met amazing teacher Sakatsu Yoshida sensei. Thanks to him, I got to know not only language, but also history, geography, and about all the culture and tradition of Japanese. And in Shodo, Japanese way of brush and ink, the meaning of the sign is external graphic form, which is a source of expression for calligrapher and very strongly interviewed. The appearance of the sign may be far from the proper form. As Ben Sean, an American painter, defined the form of artwork, he defined it like the visible shape of content. And this extremely short definition perfectly captured the essence of my view on that art of calligraphy Shodo is. Many times in my works, I use the brush strokes as a source of inspiration. As you can see, there are small format prints, which was inspired by calligraphy or using a calligraphy brush. These two are also Mokuhanga prints, and their illustration, it's my interpretation of some haiku of Matsuo Basho, and you can see that's like a facsimile of the brush strokes. And the second inspiration is the nature and beauty of wood. From my childhood, I was fascinated by the shape of the wooden structure, the color of wood, the surprising shapes, and I was never able to throw away a piece of wood. I just collect them. And during the implementation of my doctoral dissertation, I developed the wooden elements of the matrix in such a way as bring out the natural language of wood. I printed from branches, boards, slices of wood, exposing cracks, wooden structure, and their natural shapes. As you can see, the material was prepared to make a print, so I made a flat surfaces to be able to print it. And the third inspiration are sculptural specials form, which I try to combine with woodcuts to create special graphic objects. One of the series of such works are folding screens, byobu, Making biobu was for me one of the biggest inspiration during the residency in Kawełczyk 2012. Graphic print are attached to the screens. By transforming the movable wings of screens, we can obtain the different combination of images. The partition walls of the screens divide the space into different areas, from tight closed ones to the open ones. They also divide space into the zone behind and the front. I try to emphasize these features with on the screens. So as you can see, the screens can be closed and open, and both sides are really different. Henry Moore, by introducing holes into his sculptures, achieved their greater integration with the space. In the screens, opening cuts in the walls of the screens allowed for a greater spatial integration, and in some configurations reveal the hidden size of opposing areas. However, as in the stone gardens, we are never able to see all the pictures elements at the same time. And this biobu, which you can see at the title Stone Garden. So different configuration can show a different view of the whole structure, and different show the different aspect of these elements. And in this screen, which was shown on our Mokuhanga exhibition on the last conference, I mounted a little piece of a matrix of wooden branch, which you can see in this little hole, square hole on the left. So first of all, I print two prints or many prints on the washi, and then I cut the part of the matrix and mounted in this small element in this fragment. And the last series of woodcut is inspired by the shape of matowaku, the target used in Japanese Kyudo archery, which I have been practicing since 7 years. Matowaku is a wooden ring on which a paper target is mounted. And in 2019, I started to creating prints mounted on that kind of wooden frame as Kyudo targets. And these round-shaped prints are a picture of my thoughts and feelings at the moment of the releasing arrows. So that was the main inspiration for me in Mokuhanga the last 5 years. And thank you very much that you are wanted to listen about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Tomasz. That was really, really interesting. And thank you for sharing it with us. So the next presenter is Kate McDonough from Ireland. And Kate is a Sligo-born artist living and working in Dublin. And she studied at the Limerick School of Art and Design at Bellas Artes Madrid, Bob Blackburn Printmaking Studio in New York, and Milab Fujikawaguchiko, Japan. Her work is held in public and private collection at home and abroad. She is a member of the Graphic Studio in Dublin, Ireland. She's an abstract artist whose work explored dualities of light and dark, scale and ephemerality, stillness of movement, the spectral and the material. Since spending time in Japan throughout the last several years, Kate's primary focus is on Mokuhanga.
Okay, thanks, Mara. Okay, when I was invited to take part in the second PechaKucha, I wondered how I should present my work. I decided the best way to show how I approach Mokuhanga is to look at my prints through the lens of the color spectrum. My work is abstract. I use formal elements to create compositions. My signature colors are ochres, blues, and grays. However, this does change quite radically at times. Sometimes this depends on my mood. Sometimes it's seasonal, or simply because I am working on a particular project or concept. There are three techniques of Mokuhanga that I use to create and blend color: bokashi, gamazuri, and a type of keyline block of carved broken areas to help blend colors together. Starting with black, this is an enlarged version of a print I made for a collaboration borderless with the Mokuhanga sisters. I choose to use bokashi to portray the deep, dark space of the night sky, ranging from dark to light. I carved a tiny spot to give a sense of hope. I wanted to make it as tiny as I possibly could to give it a sense of our smallness in this immense universe, to show that the light can exist alongside the vast darkness, one depending on the other to show off its best side. I used Zumi ink, indigo pigment with Nakawa. It is a large print of 60 by 97 centimeters and printed on Ozo washi panchion. My claim to fame. These are the Mokuhanga sisters, portrayed in drawings by Mariko Jessie at our fortnightly Zoom meetings. We are friends, a collective of artists who met and spent time together on residencies at MiLab in Kawełczyk at the foot of Mount Fuji in Japan. Below is Borderless, an artist's book of 8 Zumi ink Mokuhanga prints, presented in an makimono scroll beautifully made by Lucy May Schofield. It is an edition of 20. This collaboration was created during the pandemic at the beginning of the first lockdown. After finishing my print for Borderless, I focused on a body of work for a solo show, exhibition at the Graphic Studio Gallery in Dublin. Due to the various lockdowns, I realized this show would not take place until at least the following summer. So this was my inspiration, the hope of the world opening up again. So I choose to use a brighter palette of ochre and light. The exhibition Moving Still opened in June 2021. I presented all the prints, which are large in size, on wood panels without frames. On the right is Cadence, a diptych using a combination of bokashi and gamazuri. Cadence 1 and 2 mounted on wood panels and printed on Ozawashi Panchion paper. I often work in series, forming compositions that will further relate to each other when placed in a gallery space. Sison, a large diptych, 120 by 97 centimeters. These are 6 prints mounted on wood panels, blue and ochre shades. Using various barons, Beta, Zuri, and Rosalind Keane, these barons helped me to achieve different tonal and color effects. It's not just the carving, but the subtle use of pressure of the barons that creates the movement within the image. I used mica on the top layer, which adds a shimmering light. Clips 1 and 2. Here I'm focusing on dark, flat surfaces. The one on the left showing a subtle Mokuhanga Zuri wood grain effect coming through. These 3 large pieces printed on shoshi, the paper commonly used for covering interior Japanese windows and sliding doors. Here are 2 installation photographs from an exhibition I had at the Model Art Centre in Sligo in the west of Ireland, where I'm from. I used natural sun-dried kozo from the Kochi prefecture in Japan. Another installation shot showing the fragility of the washi in contrast to a carved wooden panel on the back wall. Over the past few years, I have presented some carved wood panels as pieces in themselves. These are 2 prints from a series titled Somewhere in Between. Now moving towards red. Akai 1 on the left is a print I made for Kenreki, an exhibition I curated as a celebration to mark the 60th anniversary of the graphic studio, where I am a member and I teach Mokuhanga. 60 is a magical number in Japanese culture. Kan means return or cycle, and Reki depicts calendar. It is a celebration of being reborn or of a new beginning. In Japan, Kanreki is traditionally symbolized by the color red. All artists in this exhibition have incorporated red in their prints. Kanreki showed in the Model Sligo, the graphic studio in Dublin, and at the International Mokuhanga Conference in Nara, Japan. Here on the left is my print hanging next to the beautiful print Red Rain by Paul Furneaux. Kanreki was an exhibition of Mokuhanga prints by members of the Graphic Studio Dublin and invited artists connected to the studio. Paul came to the studio on a residency in 2009. We also invited Katsutoshi Yuasa-san, who was also on residency at the Graphic Studio Dublin in 2019. Another artist in the exhibition, Moya Bly, who lived in Japan and worked with Akira Kurosaki. Moya introduced Mokuhanga to the graphic studio in the early 80s. I loved working with red pigments, so I continued to experiment and made Akai 2 on the right. Akai meaning red in Japanese. Over the past month, I've been on a residency at the Irish Cultural Centre in the heart of Paris. I had a studio and easy access to the museums close by, particularly Museum d'Orsay, where there is an incredible collection of Impressionist and Post-Impressionist paintings and sculptures. I have a particular interest in the Post-Impressionists, Pointillism, and the work of George Seurat. Being on the residency gave me the opportunity to study up close and spend time with these works. The following slides are works in progress, experiments in Gomazuri, placing contrasting colors side by side to blend and create new colors. I will continue to develop this body of work over the next few months. Finally, I will finish on a quieter note with a view of my studio in Paris with a palette of ochre and greys. Thank you very much, and thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you, Kate. That was really, really beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
There will be a lot of questions. A few people entered today. I'm sorry for them because you missed some great presentation, but they will be uploaded on YouTube. And so you will be able to watch them later. First of all, I really want to thank you, Laura, Tomasz, and Kate, because I really enjoyed your presentation. A great representation of the Mokuhanga community here in Europe. Different work, different interesting thing, lots of inspiration. And well, actually, if nobody has any question yet, I would like to ask Laura, but would you do that again? I mean, that was a crazy endeavor at the beginning of your career. And,
no, I probably wouldn't do it on the same budget and the same time limits. No, it was physically hugely demanding and absolutely exhausting. So yeah, now I'm a bit older and wiser, probably not.
Not even with lino, because I know you use a lot of lino cut nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about using Mokuhanga was I was able to work with these enormous prints, so that kind of made it possible in a way I couldn't with lino because my press wasn't big enough for that. So yeah, it was a tough one.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it was. I made some 90 by 60 prints, and they're very demanding physically to print, so kudos to you. Carol has a question.
I just wanted to ask Laura. I mean, Laura, you do lots of blogging, and you're very present on you know, the Instagram and everything else. And I just love the way that you're very honest about your approaches and your mistakes as well. And I think it's very refreshing to find somebody who is willing to talk about the mistakes, because I think also often when you're learning, you just assume that everybody knows exactly what they're doing and it's just you that doesn't. So I wanted to ask you about how much mistakes make add to your understanding. And
oh, that is a really good question. Well, first of all, because I came to printmaking later in life and I was a second career artist, I was kind of perhaps a bit more confident about exposing the fact that I get things wrong quite a lot, and I'm constantly experimenting, and the price for that is mistakes. And I think that for me, I find that kind of experiment, make mistakes, move forward, a really productive way of working. I'm sort of incapable of sticking to the script. It's always kind of improvised. So I really enjoy that part of my work. I mean, nobody likes trashing an edition, but I've kind of never regretted it in a way. So it's sort of quite a part of my process.
I think it's quite unusual in a way, because I mean, I think we are very much outcome based, and I know that when I'm teaching, it's very hard to get people to experiment because they, you know, well, they've paid for a course, they want to have an outcome.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, they want that thing to take home that's perfect.
So that playfulness of, you know, seeing what will happen if you do this is.
I think that's really, really important, because if you just stick to being safe, then you never find the joy of what might be. And I do try and impress that on people with moderate amount of success in class.
Ditto.
If you want to unmute yourself, April, and shoot away.
There, can you hear me?
Yes.
I noticed and it really relates to everyone, but perhaps especially Kate. I was interested in how you access paper. It seems like the substrate is really important, well, to all three artists, but I especially noticed with Kate, the kind of paper you use really affects your image, right? Have you visited the paper mills or spoken to paper makers?
Well, I suppose the fact that I've been to Japan 4 times and the experience at MILAB was incredible. in the sense that we were introduced to paper makers, or we were introduced to places where we can buy paper. And like I buy a lot of my paper in Ozowashi, and you know, I know the people in there now from having been there a few times, and I use the same type of paper. You know, I have various papers, but maybe there are 4 or 5 papers that I use regularly. So I get repeat orders, and I get it directly.
You rely on Ozowashi.
Yeah.
Have you visited paper mills?
No, we were due to, the last time we were there, we were hoping to go to Etchison, but it didn't come about because there were, I don't know, problems or whatever. But yeah.
So Ozu, and they're in Tokyo, right?
Yes, they're in Tokyo.
I believe they have an online website now as well in English.
They do. Yeah. They're very reliable and good. Yeah. I also, I have to mention, we have a very good supply of Japanese paper here in Dublin now, Liberty Papers, and they're building a great collection of various papers. So I'm very lucky in that sense.
Yeah. I'm sure it makes a difference for Tomasz too when you're cutting them to mount them. But
yeah,
thank you.
Ralph?
I was interested in the fact that Laura used birch, and I wondered if anybody else is using birch in their mokuhanga, and what are their experiences. Laura, did you find it incredibly hard to cut? Did you have to use a hammer?
Yeah, I mean, we bought it from our local timber merchant, and what I found about it was that you could have 2 pieces that had sort of very similar grain, and one would be okay to cut and the other would be like concrete, and there was no apparent way of telling. And I actually invested in a sort of power carver to take out the large areas around the blocks, and I broke it 3 times and then we gave up with that. So in actual fact they were all hand cut, but yeah, it was very hard, and actually very hard on the hands because it kind of sucks moisture out of your hands as well. So I loved the result. I mean, you could either sand it and it was very smooth, or you could get this kind of texture of wet fabric if you didn't sand it, and I really loved that. So I did like the birch, but it's, yeah, quite demanding.
Yeah, Ralph, I also use birch simply because I needed to, because of size. I couldn't get sheen apply in large sizes when I wanted to make big prints, and I like to be able to use local wood. But it's really like, I don't carve a lot in each block. Like I use the wood just as it is to produce the textures and colors and gradations. So I really love the texture, or the grain, the wood grain that you can get from birch. It's very different to sheen apply, that's much more subtle and smooth. Yeah, so it's very nice.
Tomasz, have you used birch?
Yes, I did at the beginning, and I didn't notice that it is really hard with comparing to the Shina. It is harder, but not so hard. But mostly the problem with the birch for me was that the birch is so unstable with the contact with water. I'm also making yumi, a bow, Japanese bows, and I'm using birch sometimes, and I know that this wood is have a good characteristic of the mechanical ways, but it's so unstable with the contact with water. So That's what Kate said. If I want to achieve some nice wooden structure, I'm using a birch because it's yeah, it have a very nice lines going through, but I stopped using because of the twisting of the material.
You stopped using the birch?
Yes.
And what's better?
I'm using a different type of wood, mostly Ashina, but I'm using solid blocks.
Oh,
Only the
solid is so nice.
yeah.
If you can find it.
Only the solid blocks.
So is it a Sheena is in English, it's a type of basswood.
I think it's linden,
Linden?
possibly.
Yeah, linden and basswood are
Yeah.
similar, I
They're the
think.
same species in a way.
But Tomasz, where do you get the targets? Do you get them from Japan?
No, I made it.
Yeah.
As you can hear, I like wood. The wood is my material. So I graduated my school in the printmaking studio, but also in the sculpture studio. So for me, the wood is the material which I really like to use.
Very
And
useful.
all of these elements I'm making by myself. So I'm making a construction to my biobu and also this frames, wooden frames.
Very useful skill. Yeah. I have a lot of wooden cut. I love wood too, but I have a lot of wooden cutting boards in my kitchen.
Tomasz, and you maybe you can use the linden bales, wood blocks.
Can you say it in Polish? Because I don't know the English.
Lipowo-bolsowa sklejka. Plywood. Linden balsa plywood. Oh.
I'm not using Sheena plywood. I'm not using a plywood anymore because it's so destructive for my tools, and I'm stopped using this because of the glue between those layers.
Glue, it's the glue, yeah, the
it's
Japanese.
so destructive. So I made some plywood, but I made it by myself. So I put a thick layer of some wood, 2-3 millimeters, and passed it on the solid block. But I use it natural animal glue, and it's much better. But I'm not using this anymore. And about Jacek,
Linden balsa plywood.
I'm using similar wood to balsa. It's a little bit harder, and I'm making a construction to my biobu from it. How is it called? It's in Polish.
Może być po polsku.
In Poland is samba, I think, but I don't think it's a professional name. Maybe it's some.
Wood names are very confusing.
Yeah.
Even in English, they're all varied, and they change from one area to another.
Tomasz, I was actually, well, first of all, I was really impressed with your biobu panels because me and Tomasz, we did the same biobu workshop in Kawełczyk together, and my results were not even closer. And your development of the sculptural part of the biobu is so beautiful and interesting. And I was thinking, do you plan everything together? Do you plan the structure before, and then maybe you think about what prints you want to put on it?
Thank you, Mara, because it's a very interesting question, and actually I forgot to say about it. It's a kind of improvisation, or making those two parts simultaneously. So I have some idea for a print, and then I'm wondering what the shape of the element of biobu should be. And sometimes when I put it on the panel, I realize that the shape is not good. So I'm changing it, and then I make some changes in print. So it is simultaneous play and simultaneous way to do the one screen. And it's starting to be complicated when you have 3 panels, both sides. So it's like improvisation in that area, but it's also kind of intuition and experience of doing this.
And if there are no questions at the moment, so I will actually Katsutoshi Yuasa. Thank you, Katsu. I don't know what time it is in Japan, but it must be a crazy time. He actually, I read your something about this in Facebook on your comment a couple of days, or possibly a week ago, and he actually write again a comment now. I think he's interested if someone missed it. And he say actually, even in Japan, there are some difficulties to get the good China plywood because of the war, and because actually I didn't know that. And thank you, Katsu, for sharing this with me and with everybody. The ply inside, not the outer nice outer layers, but the layers inside are actually Russian lindel. And do you want to update us? Do you have an update us on that? We are at the same time, we actually saw that wood like Matsumura stopped selling abroad, apparently, at the moment.
Yeah, even for Japanese, most of the plywood is out of stock. But a few weeks ago, they just sold like maybe less than 100 sheets of plywood. So the universities and many artists are ordered. So it's at the moment sold out again. So it's really difficult to get the China plywood in Japan too.
I think that's really interesting. About the conversation about wood is really interesting, because I was actually listening to Ralph conversation in a podcast and the other day, and Ralph, you were talking about the difficulty of sourcing materials and the difficulties of Mokuhanga is really non-toxic, and we would love for, I would love for all students to be able to go home and make prints, but there are some difficulties in all students who are not really who don't have a lot of money to get the good stuff, the good paper, the good wood. And to me, the good paper at the moment is only washi. I have not been able to print anything good on paper that is not Japanese paper, but the conversation about wood is, I think, is really, really interesting. So, well, and thank you everybody. I'm trying to save in as much as your comment as possible and put them in the box in the YouTube video once I'm sharing.
Katsu was saying there's a difference between the Shina outer layer and the interior. Shina on the outside comes from a different location as the interior of the plywood.
Yeah.
And somebody else has said that the formaldehyde that's used in the US makes it harder. Oh my God, it's so complex.
I'm happy to talk more about that if people are really interested, because I'm an interior architect, so I can lecture about plywood, but I don't want to take up anybody's time. So I did say that I have two different pieces of birch plywood. I have actually three. I have Baltic birch, regular birch, and regular birch NAUF, which means no added urea formaldehyde. Formaldehyde has been added to plywood in the US for a couple of years now because it makes it harder. The glue, it's actually in the glue, and it makes it much harder. So I noticed when I compare the two pieces of the regular birch that has the formaldehyde and the NAUF birch that doesn't have the formaldehyde, it was much softer to carve. Almost as soft as the Sheena, but you can't get the smaller fiddly lines with the birch that you can with Sheena, because the birch grain is, the pores are bigger, so it just seems to, it skips more, and you just can't be persnickety. Anyways, I just started basically with Mokuhanga a couple of years ago, so I'm very new, but I did notice that there was a big difference in the plywood.
But Katsu, the things that we get in Japan are made in Japan. The Sheena that we buy from Japan is produced in Japan.
Yeah, produced in Japan, but the layer of plywood, like top layers, I think they are imported from Russia.
From where?
Russia.
Russia.
Russia, yeah.
Oh, that.
Yeah, actually we can get in Hokkaido, in the north part of Japan. But of course, the imported wood is cheaper than the Japanese one. So the company started to import before, but at the moment we need to produce the Japanese ones.
But it'll be a lot more expensive.
But should be more expensive, yeah.
So maybe,
and also not ready yet.
But Laura, you are also making some experiment with making your own.
Yeah, we've been trying out blocks because we've got a surface of planer, so we can take ordinary planks and get them very, very smooth. And then I just use a sheet of cheap 6mm ply and use wood glue to make a sandwich and clamp it good and solid. And that works really nicely, actually, because then, of course, you've got the option to try different timbers and stuff like that. So I had some lime that we've had a long time. It's very fine grained and it works an absolute treat because you can have a thick layer.
Lime is linden, right?
Yeah, that's right. And also I tried it with in London, in Taglio, they sell side grain poplar, and I've tried it with the blocks of side grain poplar, and again it works very well. But I want to do some experiments with cherry, but it's finding the right cherry.
Yes, Kate.
Laura, could I ask you a question about framing?
Yeah, sure.
Your prints that you made shortly after you took up Mokuhanga, it's a nightmare at the beginning trying to present work for framing. So did you know at that point how to back prints, or how did you manage to get around that?
Well, I was incredibly lucky because that mounting and backing prints was something that we studied in the MI lab residency that I attended the year before. So I backed them with wheat starch glue onto board as we'd been shown in the workshop, just like on a huge scale. And I have to say the first ones that I did, and bear in mind that I had no backup, I didn't get it quite right. And I came down in the morning and they were like bows, the wood had, and I was like, this is fortunately, we soaked them and we got the wood completely flat again and clamped it. So it saved the situation, but it was like, these are the only prints I've got. And now they're this shape.
Yeah.
It was just horrific.
The paper is so forgiving, isn't it?
It is. It is. I mean,
it's incredible. Yeah.
Being able to sponge them and wet them and get them flat and the image stay perfect was just incredible privilege. Yeah. And
watercolor not moving. You
know, it was fine. It was fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, took a few years off the end of my life, if I can say.
We've all been there. Yeah.
Kate, I wanted to actually ask you, because especially the borderless blueprint resonate with me. Of course, you all know about my work. So it's really, when I saw it, was just how many layers of colors?
Many layers, but it was beautiful to print, and that's why I made a large one, because I so enjoyed making the small borderless print. And to see the layers, you know, I did it over time so that the zoomy would really seep in there, and it just was lovely to see. And the grain would come up as I printed as well, as the layers went on.
So you let it dry, and you print a couple of layers, and then you let it dry and print some more.
Let it dampen, and yeah. I might do 3 layers. Yeah.
That's really, but with such a large print and with your very small dot, that
I know. Yeah. it's my legacy.
Thank you. And as I said, the next PechaKucha will be in possibly 3 to 4 months. There's summer in between, so we need to set a date, but we'll keep you updated as soon as we know. And it will be in Japan time zone, so possibly with some interesting presenter from Japan / Australia, that time zone. And Ralph, do you want to say a farewell?
Well, Mara, I think as well, in September, I think as well, is the Impact Conference. So
exactly.
There'll be a lot of Mokuhanga presenters, a lot of people doing Mokuhanga who will be, you know.
I'll be there. So hope to see many of you in Bristol. So I think if there are no other questions, we can maybe wrap it up. And again, thank you very much, Laura, Tomasz, and Kate. Your presentation were stunning, and I really, really enjoy all 3 of them.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna go, and as I said, you will find a recording of this session on YouTube pretty soonish, as I will polish it a little bit, and then it will be uploaded online. And for any information, on social, you can follow the International Mokuhanga Association on Instagram and on Facebook, and you can also send me direct messages. I will give you the correct link. And again, thank you everybody for spending an hour and a half of a Sunday evening in Europe, and I think Sunday morning in the US. And again, Japanese guy, you were amazing for being here. And it was great to have you here. Hope to see you all next time.
Thanks, Mara.
Thanks,
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.